She refused every man in the village, then married a dog? Welcome to Tales by Felix, where every story unlocks a new world. Remember to subscribe, like and share. Let's begin. In the heart of Silver Creek, a village nestled between emerald hills and a winding river that shimmered like liquid silver under the sun, lived Elara, a woman whose beauty was the stuff of legends. Her hair cascaded in waves of midnight black, her eyes gleamed like polished jade, and her smile could make the hardest heart falter. Men from distant towns, even from the shadowed cities beyond the mountains, journeyed to Silver Creek, their hearts alight with hope to win her favor. They brought gifts of silks, gold, and promises of grand lives, but Elara turned them all away with a polite, unyielding smile. Her heart was a fortress, impregnable and cold, built on the unshakable belief that no man could meet her standards. She dreamed of a partner who embodied perfection, brave as a lion, loyal as the stars that never strayed from the night sky, and loving with a devotion that knew no bounds. She wanted a knight in shining armor, a figure so flawless he seemed to exist only in the pages of fairy tales. The villagers whispered that Elara's standards were her curse, a self-imposed exile from love. "She'll die alone," they muttered in the tavern, shaking their heads. "No man can scale those walls." Elara, however, was unmoved. She spent her days tending her small garden, where roses bloomed in defiance of the rocky soil, and her evenings reading by candlelight, lost in stories of heroes and epic romances. Her home, a modest cottage at the edge of the village, was her sanctuary, its walls lined with books and its windows offering a view of the world she refused to let in. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire, Elara sat with her childhood friend, Mara, in the candlelit warmth of her cottage. Mara, a lively woman with freckles like scattered stars and a laugh that could fill a room, was Elara's only confidant. "You turned away Lord Harrow's son today," Mara said, sipping her tea, her brown eyes glinting with mischief. "The poor man looked like he'd been struck by lightning when you sent him packing." Elara sighed, setting her book aside. "He was vain, Mara. All he spoke of was his estate, his horses, his titles. I want someone who sees me, not a prize to be won." Mara leaned forward, her voice teasing but gentle. "Elara, no one's perfect. You're looking for a myth. What if you miss something real because you're chasing a dream?" Elara's gaze drifted to the window, where the first stars were beginning to wink in the twilight. "I'd rather be alone than settle for less," she said softly. "I know what I want, Mara. I'll feel it when it comes." Mara shook her head, but her smile was fond. "You're impossible, Elara. Beautiful and impossible." The village continued its rhythm, the blacksmith's hammer ringing, the market bustling with gossip and trade, but Elara remained a mystery, her heart locked away, her dreams too grand for the small world of Silver Creek. Yet, in the quiet of her soul, a flicker of longing stirred, a hope that somewhere, somehow, her perfect match existed. A storm rolled into Silver Creek one autumn night, its thunder shaking the earth and its rain lashing the cobblestone streets. The villagers huddled in their homes, the wind howling like a chorus of restless spirits. It was on this night, as lightning cracked the sky, that a stranger arrived. He was tall, cloaked in a dark weather-beaten mantle, his face shadowed by a hood. Beside him padded a German shepherd, its fur black and tan, its eyes gleaming with an almost human intelligence. The dog, majestic and unyielding despite the storm, walked with a grace that turned heads even in the chaos. The stranger took a room at the Rusty Anchor, the village's only inn, and paid in silver coins that glinted like the river's namesake. He spoke little, his voice low and measured, revealing only his name, Silas. The dog, he said, was Argus. The innkeeper, a stout man named Tobin, tried to pry more from him, but Silas offered only a polite nod before retreating to his room, Argus at his heels. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and the village buzzing with curiosity. Who was this Silas? A wanderer? A fugitive? A noble in disguise? And that dog, Argus, seemed more than a mere pet, his presence commanding respect. The villagers watched as Silas and Argus walked the forest paths each day, the man's stride purposeful, the dog's gaze alert. They kept to themselves, avoiding the market and the tavern, their solitude fueling the village's imagination. Elara first saw them from her cottage window, her breath catching as Argus bounded through the meadow, his movements fluid and powerful. Silas followed, his dark hair catching the sunlight, his expression distant yet kind. There was something in his eyes, a sadness, a weight that spoke of a story untold. Elara found herself watching them day after day, her curiosity growing like a vine, wrapping around her thoughts. She had never felt this pull before, this need to know more. One afternoon, Mara burst into Elara's cottage, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Have you seen him?" she asked, flopping onto a chair. "The stranger, Silas? They say he's a sorcerer, or maybe a knight hiding from his enemies. And that dog, Argus, it's like he's guarding a secret." Elara smiled, her eyes drifting to the window. "I've seen them," she admitted. "There's something different about them." Mara's brows shot up. "Different? Elara, you're smitten." The untouchable Elara, finally caught by a mysterious stranger. Elara laughed, but it was hollow. "It's not like that," she said, though her heart stirred at the thought of Argus's steady gaze. I don't know. I want to know more." Mara grinned, undeterred. "Well, you'd better hurry. The whole village is talking about them. If you don't make a move, someone else will." Elara shook her head, but as Mara chattered on, her thoughts were elsewhere, tangled in the mystery of Silas and Argus, and the strange, inexplicable feeling that they were meant to cross her path. The air was cool and fragrant with pine as Elara walked along the riverbank, her boots sinking into the soft earth. She often came here to clear her mind, the river's gentle murmur a balm to her restless heart. Today, though, her steps faltered as she spotted them, Silas and Argus, by the water's edge. Silas sat on a flat rock, sketching in a leather-bound book, while Argus lay beside him, his ears twitching at the sound of a distant bird. Elara hesitated, her heart pounding. She should turn back, leave them to their solitude. But then Argus lifted his head, his amber eyes locking onto hers. He rose, tail wagging, and trotted toward her with a grace that made her breath catch. Up close, he was even more striking, his fur gleaming, his presence almost regal. "Hello," Elara said softly, kneeling to meet him. Argus nudged her hand, his nose warm and soft, and she laughed, a sound that surprised her with its lightness. "You're a beauty, aren't you?" Silas looked up, closing his book. He stood, his movements deliberate, and approached her. "He likes you," he said, his voice warm but tinged with that same sadness she'd glimpsed from afar. "I'm Silas. This is Argus." "Elara," she replied, standing but keeping a hand on Argus's head. The dog leaned into her touch, his eyes never leaving hers. "He's extraordinary." Silas smiled, a small, guarded curve of his lips. "He's more than he seems," he said, then paused, as if weighing his words. "You're the one the village talks about, aren't you? The woman who turns away every suitor." Elara's cheeks warmed. Flushed, but she met his gaze steadily. "They talk too much in Silver Creek." Silas chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "They do. But Argus seems to think you're special." At the mention of his name, Argus pressed closer to Elara, his warmth steadying her. She scratched behind his ears, marveling at the depth in his eyes. "He understands things, doesn't he?" she said, almost to herself. Silas watched her closely, his expression unreadable. "More than most," he said quietly. "He's a good judge of character." Elara felt a strange warmth spread through her, not for Silas, but for the dog who seemed to see into her very soul. "You're lucky to have him," she said, her voice soft. Silas nodded, his eyes lingering on her. "I am. But sometimes I think he's the one who owns me." They stood in silence for a moment, the river's song filling the space between them. Elara wanted to ask more, to unravel the mystery of this man and his dog, but Argus nudged her hand again, and she found herself lost in his gaze, as if he alone understood her unspoken dreams. The whispers began the next morning, spreading through Silver Creek like wildfire. "Elara's finally fallen," the baker's wife declared at the market, her voice dripping with glee. "She's been seen with that stranger, Silas." The tavern buzzed with speculation, each tale wilder than the last. Some said Silas was a prince in exile, others a warlock bound to his beastly familiar. But the truth was far stranger. Elara's heart wasn't stirred by Silas, but by Argus. She found herself drawn to the forest paths where Silas and Argus walked, her excuses to Mara growing thinner each day. "I just need air," she'd say, but her eyes searched for the flash of black and tan fur. When she found them, Argus would bound to her side, his presence a comfort she couldn't explain. They'd sit together in silence, Elara's fingers buried in his fur, her heart lighter than it had been in years. One evening, as Elara lingered by the river with Argus, Mara caught her on her way home. "You're spending an awful lot of time with that dog," Mara said, her tone half teasing, half concerned. "People are starting to talk." "Let them," Elara replied, her voice sharp. "Argus is better company than any of them." Mara frowned, her hands on her hips. "Elara, he's a dog. You can't mean that." Elara's eyes flashed. "He listens, Mara. He understands me in a way no one else does. Not you, not those suitors, no one." Mara's jaw dropped, but before she could respond, Elara turned and walked away, Argus's warmth lingering in her memory. The village's gossip grew louder, their words turning cruel. "She's lost her mind," they whispered. "In love with a beast." But Elara didn't care. Argus was no beast. He was her confidant, her solace, her impossible dream come to life. The tension in Silver Creek snapped like a taut bowstring when Torin, a hulking hunter with a temper as fierce as his aim, stormed into the rusty anchor one evening. His face was red with fury, his pride wounded by Elara's latest rejection. The tavern fell silent as he pointed at Silas, who sat quietly with Argus by his side. "You think you can waltz in here and steal her?" Torin bellowed. "I challenge you, stranger. A duel for Elara's hand." Silas rose, his expression calm but firm. "I have no claim on her," he said. "And I don't fight for sport." The crowd gasped, but Torin's rage only grew. He turned his glare on Argus, who sat alert at Silas's feet. "Then maybe I'll rid this village of that beast instead," he snarled, drawing his hunting knife. Elara, who had been sitting in the corner with Mara, leapt to her feet. "Leave him alone!" she shouted, her voice ringing with a fierceness that stunned the room. "Argus has done nothing to you." Torin laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Defending a dog? You're madder than they say, Elara." The villagers murmured, their eyes darting between Elara and Argus. Silas stepped forward, his hand on Torin's arm. "Walk away," he said quietly, but his tone carried a warning. Torin shook him off, but the innkeeper intervened, ushering him out. The damage was done, though. Elara's outburst had sealed her fate in the village's eyes. As she left the tavern, Argus at her side, she felt the weight of their stares, their whispers cutting deeper than any knife. That night, alone in her cottage, Elara knelt beside Argus, who had followed her home with Silas's permission. "They don't understand," she whispered, her tears falling into his fur. Argus licked her cheek, his eyes full of a love so pure it broke her heart. "But you do, don't you?" As the village slept, Elara's resolve hardened. She would not let them tear her apart from Argus. Not now, not ever. The days in Silver Creek grew colder, the autumn leaves painting the forest in shades of amber and crimson, but Elara's heart burned with a warmth she'd never known. Her time with Argus, the majestic German shepherd, had become her refuge, a silent sanctuary where words were unnecessary and understanding was absolute. Each morning, she'd find him waiting near her cottage, his amber eyes bright with recognition, his tail wagging like a metronome of joy. Silas, ever the enigmatic guardian, allowed these meetings, his own presence a quiet shadow in the background. Elara began to notice things about Argus that set him apart from any animal she'd ever known. When she sat on the riverbank, lost in thought, he'd rest his head on her knee, his gaze seeming to pierce through her worries. When she spoke, of her dreams, her fears, her loneliness, he listened with an intensity that felt almost human. One crisp afternoon, as they sat beneath a towering oak, Elara poured out her heart, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always wanted someone who sees me, Argus," she said, her fingers tracing the soft fur behind his ears. "Not the beauty everyone talks about, but me. The part that's scared, that hopes, that dreams of something bigger. No one's ever come close. Until you." Argus tilted his head, his eyes locking onto hers, and for a moment, Elara swore she saw a flicker of something deeper, a spark of understanding that transcended the boundary between human and beast. He nudged her hand, a low whine escaping his throat, and she laughed through the tears welling in her eyes. "You get it, don't you? You're braver than any knight, more loyal than any suitor. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Elara would bring him scraps of bread and cheese, which he accepted with a dignified nibble, but it was her presence he seemed to crave most. They'd walk the forest paths together, her hand resting on his back, his steady gait a comfort against the whispers of the village. The gossips had grown bolder, their words sharper. "She's bewitched," the blacksmith's wife hissed at the market. "That dog's no natural creature." One evening, as Elara and Argus sat by the fire in her cottage, Silas knocked on her door. His face was drawn, his usual calm tinged with unease. "Elara," he said, stepping inside, "the village is talking. They're saying things about you, and Argus." Elara's jaw tightened, her hand resting protectively on Argus's head. "Let them talk," she said defiantly. "They've never understood me." Silas's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "Be careful. Words can turn to actions, and I don't want you hurt." Elara met his gaze, her heart pounding. "I'm not afraid, Silas. Argus is more to me than they'll ever know." Silas studied her for a long moment, then nodded, a hint of something, respect, perhaps, or sorrow, flashing in his eyes. "He's lucky to have you," he said quietly before leaving her alone with Argus, the fire casting shadows that danced like secrets across the walls. The weight of the village's judgment pressed harder on Elara as the days passed, but her resolve only grew. Argus was her anchor, the one being who saw her for who she truly was. Yet, even she couldn't deny the strangeness of her feelings. They weren't romantic in the way she'd once imagined love, but they were profound, a connection that defied explanation. She needed to tell someone, to make sense of the storm within her. She chose Mara, her oldest friend, whose blunt honesty had always grounded her. They met at Mara's small bakery, the air thick with the scent of fresh bread and cinnamon. Mara was kneading dough, her hands dusted with flour, when Elara arrived, Argus at her side. The dog settled by the door, his eyes watchful but calm. "Mara," Elara began, her voice trembling, "I need to tell you something. It's about Argus." Mara paused, wiping her hands on her apron, her brow furrowing. "You've been spending every waking moment with that dog, Elara. What's going on?" Elara took a deep breath, her hands twisting in her lap. "He's not just a dog to me. He understands me, Mara. When I'm with him, I feel whole. Like he's the one I've been waiting for all this time. I think I love him." The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Mara's eyes widened, her mouth falling open. "Elara, you can't be serious. He's a dog. A dog, not a man. This is madness." Elara's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. "You don't understand. He's more than that. He's loyal, brave, everything I've ever wanted. I don't care what he is." Mara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Elara, listen to yourself. The village already thinks you're strange. If this gets out, they'll shun you. They'll call you a witch, or worse." "Let them," Elara snapped, her eyes blazing. "I'd rather be alone with Argus than surrounded by people who judge me." Mara shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I'm trying to protect you, Elara. Please, think about what you're saying." But Elara was already standing, Argus rising to follow her. "I have," she said, her voice steady. "And I choose him." By nightfall, Mara's shock had turned to panic, and she confided in her mother, who told the butcher, who told the tavern. The news spread like a plague, twisting with each retelling. "Elara's in love with a dog," the villagers cried, their voices a mix of horror and glee. "She's lost her mind." Children taunted her name in the streets, and the elders shook their heads, muttering about curses and sin. Elara, undeterred, held Argus closer, his warmth a shield against the world's scorn. But deep down, a seed of fear took root. She knew the village's patience was wearing thin. The village elders, a council of 5 stern-faced men and women who held Silver Creek's moral compass, could no longer ignore the scandal. They summoned Elara to the town hall, a stone building that loomed like judgment itself. The room was packed, the air thick with tension, as Elara stood before them, her chin high, Argus absent but his presence a shadow in her heart. Elder Gwendolyn, a woman with iron-gray hair and eyes like flint, spoke first. "Elara, your behavior has brought shame to Silver Creek. This obsession with a beast is unnatural. It ends now. Elara's heart pounded, but her voice was steady. It's not an obsession. It's love. You wouldn't understand. The crowd gasped, murmurs rippling through the room. Elder Tom, a grizzled man with a voice like gravel, leaned forward. Love. For a dog. You mock us, girl. You will marry a man from this village, or you will be cast out. Elara's eyes flashed with defiance. I'd rather leave than betray my heart. The room erupted, shouts of madwoman and witch echoing off the walls. Torin, the hunter who had challenged Silas, pushed to the front, his face twisted with rage. Give up the dog, he bellowed, turning to Silas, who stood quietly at the back. Or leave, stranger, and take your cursed beast with you. Silas's face remained calm, but his hand rested on Argus's head, a silent promise of protection. We've done no harm, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. But if it's a choice between peace and staying, we'll go. Elara's heart sank, her eyes meeting Argus's across the room. The thought of losing him was a knife to her soul. She stepped forward, her voice ringing out. You can't take him from me. He's mine, and I'm his. The crowd fell silent, stunned by her ferocity. Elder Gwendolyn's face hardened. You have 1 week, Elara. Marry, or leave. And you, Silas, take your dog and go, or face the consequences. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, Elara fled, her tears blurring the starlit path to her cottage. Argus followed, his presence a silent vow that he would not abandon her. The next morning, Silas came to Elara's cottage, his face etched with resolve. Argus sat at his side, his eyes fixed on Elara with a sorrow that mirrored her own. The air was heavy, the silence between them a fragile thread. Elara, Silas began, his voice low, I've brought nothing but trouble to you and this village. I can't stay. Elara's breath caught, her hands clenching into fists. No. You can't leave. Argus. I can't lose him. Silas's eyes softened, but his words were firm. I've seen what this is doing to you. The village will never accept you as long as we're here. Argus and we'll go tonight. Elara's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, Argus rushing to her side. She buried her face in his fur, her sobs muffled. You're the only one who understands me, she whispered. How can I let you go? Argus whined, licking her tears, his warmth a fleeting comfort. Silas knelt beside her, his voice gentle but resolute. I'm sorry, Elara. I never meant for this to happen. But I can't let you suffer for us. As he stood to leave, Elara grabbed his arm, her eyes blazing through her tears. Promise me you'll take care of him. Promise me he'll be safe. Silas nodded, his expression unreadable. I swear it. That night, as the moon hung low and heavy, Elara watched from her window as Silas and Argus disappeared into the forest, their silhouettes swallowed by the darkness. Her heart shattered, each step they took a wound she feared would never heal. Elara couldn't sleep. The emptiness of her cottage was unbearable, the silence where Argus's soft breaths should have been a torment. She paced, her mind racing, her heart screaming that she couldn't let him go. By dawn, her decision was made. She would find them, no matter the cost. She grabbed a cloak, a waterskin, and a small knife, then ran into the forest, her boots pounding the earth. The trail was faint, but she knew the paths Silas favored, the ones where Argus's pawprints marked the soft ground. Hours passed, the sun climbing high, then sinking low, but Elara didn't falter. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but her love for Argus drove her forward. As dusk painted the sky in shades of violet, she spotted them at the forest's edge, near a clearing where the river widened. Silas stood by a small fire, Argus lying beside him, his ears pricked as if sensing her approach. Elara stumbled into the clearing, her breath ragged, her voice raw. Don't go, she cried, falling to her knees before Argus. I can't live without him, Silas. Please. Argus bounded to her, his tail wagging furiously, his nose pressing against her cheek. Silas watched, his face a mask of conflict. Elara, he said softly, you don't know what you're asking. I do, she insisted, her hands buried in Argus's fur. He's everything to me. I'll follow you to the ends of the earth if I have to. Silas's eyes searched hers, and for the first time, She saw something break in his stoic facade. He knelt beside her, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you need to know, Elara. About Argus. About why we're here." She looked up, her heart pounding. "Tell me," she said, her voice steady despite the storm within her. "Tell me everything." Silas glanced at Argus, then back at her, his words heavy with the weight of a secret too long held. "He's not just a dog, Elara. And your love for him, it might be the key to everything." The forest clearing was bathed in moonlight, the river's gentle ripple the only sound as Elara knelt beside Argus, her hands buried in his fur, her heart pounding with desperation. Silas's words hung in the air like a spell, heavy with unspoken truths. "He's not just a dog, Elara," he had said, his voice low and measured, as if revealing a secret could shatter the world. "And your love for him, it might be the key to everything." Elara's breath caught, her eyes searching Silas's face. Argus pressed closer, his amber gaze steady, almost urging her to listen. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute. "What is he?" Silas sat across from her, the fire casting flickering shadows across his weary features. He hesitated, as if weighing the cost of his words. "Argus is under a curse," he said finally. "He was once a man, a prince, named Alistair, heir to a kingdom far from here. A sorcerer, driven by jealousy and spite, transformed him into a dog, a form meant to ensure he'd never be loved, never be accepted." Elara's mind reeled, her hands tightening on Argus's fur. She looked into his eyes, those soulful depths that had always seemed more than animal, and a shiver ran through her. "A prince," she whispered, almost to herself. Argus whined softly, nudging her hand, as if confirming the impossible truth. Silas nodded, his voice heavy with guilt. "I was his aide, sworn to protect him. I failed him once, when the sorcerer struck. I've been by his side ever since, searching for a way to break the curse. It can only be undone by true love, a love pure enough to see beyond his form, to accept him as he is." Elara's heart raced, a mix of awe and fear swirling within her. She had felt that love, hadn't she? The connection that transcended words, the way Argus seemed to know her every thought, her every pain. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why let me think he was just a dog?" Silas's eyes softened, but his tone was firm. "Because the curse demands truth. Your love had to be real, untainted by knowledge of his past. If you'd known, it might have changed how you felt, made it about pity or hope for a prince, not love for him as he is." Elara looked at Argus, her tears falling into his fur. "I do love him," she said, her voice fierce. "Not as a prince, but as Argus. The one who's been there for me, who's never judged me." Argus's tail thumped softly, his eyes never leaving hers. Silas leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Then there's hope, Elara. But it won't be easy. The curse requires a test, a vow of love so profound it defies reason. Are you willing to face that?" Elara met his gaze, her resolve hardening like steel. "I'll do whatever it takes." Silas nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Then we stay. But the village, they'll make this harder." Elara's jaw tightened. "Let them try to stop me." The next morning, Elara woke with a fire in her chest. The revelation of Argus's true identity had shifted her world, but it hadn't changed her heart. If anything, it made her love for him fiercer, a flame that burned away doubt. She met Silas and Argus at the riverbank, the air crisp with the promise of winter. Argus bounded to her, his joy undimmed, and she knelt to embrace him, her heart swelling. Silas stood nearby, his expression grave. "The test," he said, "is a vow of marriage. You must marry Argus, knowing he's a dog, and declare your love before a witness. Only then, if your heart is true, will the curse break." Elara's breath caught, her mind spinning. Marry a dog? The village would call her mad, a laughingstock, or worse, a witch. But as she looked into Argus's eyes, she saw the soul within, the prince trapped in fur and claw, and her fear melted away. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. "I don't care what they think." Silas's eyes widened, a mix of admiration and concern. "You understand what this means. The village will never forgive you. You'll be an outcast, even if the curse breaks. Elara stood, her hand resting on Argus's head. I've been an outcast my whole life, Silas. I've turned away every man because none of them saw me. Argus does. If this is what it takes to save him, I'm ready. Silas studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then we'll do it in secret, away from their eyes. Tomorrow night, in the forest. I'll be your witness. That day, Elara prepared in silence, her heart a storm of hope and defiance. She sewed a simple white dress from an old tablecloth, its hem embroidered with tiny roses, a nod to her garden, her sanctuary. She spoke to Argus as she worked, her voice soft but sure. I don't know what happens next, she said, threading a needle. But I know I love you. That's enough. Argus lay at her feet, his eyes never leaving her, and she felt a strength she'd never known. The village could scorn her, banish her, but they couldn't take this bond that felt like destiny. That evening, Mara came to her cottage, her face pale with worry. Elara, they're saying you've gone mad, that you're planning something with that dog. Please, tell me it's not true. Elara met her friend's gaze, her heart heavy but resolute. It's true, Mara. I love him. And I'm going to save him. Mara's eyes filled with tears. You're throwing your life away. For a dog. He's more than that, Elara said softly. And if you can't see it, then you don't know me at all. Mara left in tears, and Elara knew their friendship might never recover. But as she looked at Argus, his warmth steadying her, she felt no regret, only purpose. The forest was a cathedral of shadows that night, the moon casting silver light through the canopy. Elara stood in her simple white dress, her heart pounding but her hands steady. Silas had prepared a small circle of stones, a makeshift altar where wildflowers lay scattered, their scent mingling with the earth. Argus stood before her, his fur gleaming, his eyes bright with an emotion she couldn't name but felt in her bones. Silas stood to the side, his face solemn but kind. This is your moment, Elara, he said. Speak your truth. Elara knelt before Argus, her hands trembling as she took a simple gold band, a trinket she'd found among her mother's things, and slipped it onto his paw, where it hung loosely, a symbol of her faith. Argus, she began, her voice clear despite the weight of the moment, I don't know who you were or who you'll be. I only know who you are to me. You've seen me when no one else did, loved me when I felt unlovable. I vow to stand by you, to fight for you, to love you, no matter what form you take. You are my heart, my home, my everything. The words poured out, raw and true, and Argus pressed his head against hers, a low whine escaping his throat. Elara's tears fell, but she smiled, her heart full. I marry you, Argus, she whispered, with all that I am. Silas stepped forward, his voice steady. I bear witness to this vow, made in truth and love. May the curse be broken, if the heart is pure. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the air charged with an unseen energy. Elara waited, her eyes locked on Argus, hoping for a sign, a spark, a shift. But nothing happened. The silence stretched, heavy and unbroken, and doubt crept into her heart. Silas placed a hand on her shoulder. It's done, he said softly. The rest is up to fate. Elara nodded, her heart a mix of hope and fear. She kissed Argus's head, her lips brushing his fur, and whispered, I believe in you. As Elara's lips touched Argus's fur, a sudden wind swept through the clearing, sharp and cold, carrying the scent of ozone and magic. The air crackled, and a blinding light erupted from Argus, forcing Elara and Silas to shield their eyes. The ground trembled, the stones of the altar shifting, and a sound like distant thunder filled the night. Elara stumbled back, her heart pounding, as Argus's form began to change. His fur shimmered, then receded, his limbs lengthening, his paws morphing into hands. The light pulsed, and before her astonished eyes, the dog she loved became a man. He was tall, with dark hair that fell in waves, and eyes that held the same amber depth she'd known as Argus's. His face was noble, handsome, but etched with the weight of years spent in a form not his own. Alistair, Silas breathed, falling to one knee, his voice thick with relief. Elara's breath caught, her hands trembling as she stared at the man before her. Argus, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He turned to her, his eyes softening, and nodded. It's me, Elara, he said, his voice deep and warm, yet carrying the same gentleness she'd felt in his canine gaze. "You broke the curse. Your love. It was true." Elara's knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, tears streaming down her face. Alistair knelt before her, his hands gentle as they took hers. "I felt you," he said, his voice breaking. "Every moment, every word, every touch. You saw me when no one else could." Elara laughed through her tears, her heart soaring. "I didn't care what you were," she said. "I just knew I loved you." Silas stood, a rare smile breaking across his face. "You've done what I thought impossible," he said. "You've given him back his life." The forest seemed to sigh, the magic fading, leaving only the three of them in the moonlight. Elara and Alistair stood, their hands still clasped, their bond unbroken by the transformation. But as the joy settled, Elara felt a flicker of fear. What would this mean for them now? They sat by the fire, the night growing late, as Alistair told his story. His voice was steady, but his eyes held the weight of years lost. "I was Prince Alistair of Irinder," he began, "heir to a kingdom rich in magic and history. A sorcerer, Malachar, sought my hand for his daughter, but I refused. My heart wasn't hers. In his rage, he cursed me, turning me into a dog, a form he thought would ensure my misery. He believed no one could love a beast." Elara listened, her hand resting on his, marveling at the warmth of human skin where fur had once been. "But you found me," she said softly. Alistair smiled, a bittersweet curve of his lips. "I did." Silas stayed by my side, searching for a way to break the curse. "We traveled for years, hopeless, until we came to Silver Creek. I felt something in you, Elara, from the first moment. A heart as fierce and true as any I'd ever known." Silas nodded, his voice quiet. "I knew you were different, Elara. But I never imagined you'd be this brave." Elara's cheeks warmed, but her mind raced. "What now?" she asked. "You're a prince. Your kingdom, they'll want you back." Alistair's eyes darkened. "They will. But I'm not the man I was. The curse changed me, and so did you. I don't know if I belong there anymore." Elara's heart ached at the thought of losing him, even as a man. "And the village?" she asked, glancing at Silas. "They'll never believe this. They'll think it's witchcraft." Silas's jaw tightened. "We'll face them together. But first, Alistair must decide his path, and you, Elara, must decide yours." As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of gold, Elara looked at Alistair, her heart torn between the love she'd found and the world that awaited them. The curse was broken, but their story was far from over. The dawn broke over Silver Creek, casting a golden glow across the village's cobblestone streets and thatched roofs. Elara, Alistair, and Silas trudged back from the forest, their steps heavy with the weight of what had transpired. Alistair, no longer the German shepherd Argus but a tall, noble prince with eyes that still held the soulful depth Elara loved, walked beside her, his hand brushing hers. Elara's heart was a storm of joy and apprehension. Her love had broken a curse, but the village loomed ahead, a gauntlet of judgment waiting to test her resolve. As they entered the village square, heads turned, and whispers spread like wildfire. The baker's wife dropped her basket of loaves, the blacksmith froze mid-hammer, and children pointed, their eyes wide. Torin, the hunter who had challenged Silas, stood at the tavern door, his face darkening as he saw Alistair. "Who's this?" he growled, his hand twitching toward his knife. Elara stepped forward, her chin high. "This is Alistair," she said, her voice ringing with defiance. "The man you knew as Argus. The curse is broken, and I broke it." The crowd erupted, a cacophony of gasps and shouts. "Witchcraft!" cried the butcher. "Lies!" snarled Torin. But Elder Gwendolen, her iron-gray hair glinting in the sunlight, raised a hand for silence. "Explain yourself, Elara," she said, her voice sharp but curious. Elara took a deep breath, her hand finding Alistair's. "Argus was a prince, cursed by a sorcerer to live as a dog. My love for him, my true love, broke the spell. He's Prince Alistair of Irinder, and I stand by him." Alistair stepped forward, his presence commanding despite his simple traveler's cloak. "I owe my life to Elara," he said, his voice steady and warm. "She saw me when no one else could, loved me when I was nothing but a beast. Judge her if you must, but know she's braver than any of you." The villagers murmured, some with awe, others with skepticism. Torin spat on the ground, his face twisted. "A prince? You expect us to believe this fairy tale? She's bewitched you all." Silas, silent until now, stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "I was his aide, witness to the curse and its breaking. Deny it if you will, but the truth stands before you." Elder Tom, his grizzled face softened by wonder, approached Alistair. "If you're a prince, where's your proof? Your kingdom?" Alistair met his gaze. "My kingdom is far from here, but I carry its crest." He pulled a small, tarnished medallion from his cloak, engraved with a lion and a star. The elders exchanged glances, their doubt wavering. Gwendolen turned to Elara, her expression unreadable. "You've defied us, Elara, and yet, you've done the impossible. We were wrong to judge you so harshly." Torin stormed off, his pride wounded, and the crowd began to disperse, their whispers now tinged with awe. Elara felt a weight lift, but her heart still raced. What did this mean for her and Alistair? That evening, Mara came to Elara's cottage, her eyes red from crying. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't understand. I was scared for you, but you were right. He's incredible." Elara embraced her, tears in her own eyes. "I know it was hard to see, Mara. But thank you for coming back." As Mara left, Alistair took Elara's hand. "You faced a village for me," he said softly. "I've never known such courage." Elara smiled, her heart full. "I faced them for us." Word of the miracle spread beyond Silver Creek, carried by travelers and merchants until it reached the ears of Erinder's court. A week later, a royal entourage arrived, their banners snapping in the wind, their horses' hooves thundering on the village paths. At their head rode King Roderick, Alistair's father, a man with a silver beard and eyes that held both strength and sorrow. The village gathered in the square, awestruck, as the king dismounted, his gaze fixed on Alistair. "My son," he said, his voice trembling as he embraced him. "I thought you lost forever." Alistair returned the embrace, but his eyes sought Elara's. "I was lost, father, until she found me." King Roderick turned to Elara, his expression softening. "You are the one who broke the curse," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a kingdom's gratitude. "Name your reward, child. Gold, land, a place at court, anything you desire." Elara's heart pounded, the eyes of the village upon her. She glanced at Alistair, his presence a steady anchor. "I want nothing but to live true to my heart," she said. "I don't need riches or titles. I need him." The crowd murmured, some with admiration, others with envy. The king's eyes twinkled, a rare smile breaking through his stern demeanor. "A heart as pure as yours is rare indeed. You'll have a place in Erinder, if you choose it." That night, a feast was held in the village square, the tables laden with roasted meats, fresh bread, and wine from the king's stores. The villagers, once so quick to judge, now toasted Elara's name, their faces flushed with pride. Torin skulked at the edges, his anger simmering but powerless against the king's presence. As the firelight danced, Alistair pulled Elara aside, his hand warm in hers. "My father wants me to return to Erinder," he said, his voice low. "To take my place as heir. But I don't know if that's my path anymore." Elara's heart tightened. "What do you want, Alistair?" He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the flames. "I want you. But I want you to choose, too. Erinder is a gilded cage, courts, duties, expectations. Silver Creek is your home, your freedom. I'll follow you, wherever you go." Elara's breath caught, the weight of his words sinking in. She loved him, but the thought of leaving her simple life, her garden, her cottage, was a wound she hadn't expected. "I need time," she said softly, "to know what's right." He nodded, his smile gentle. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere without you." The king's entourage lingered in Silver Creek, their presence a reminder of the life awaiting Alistair. Elara spent her days torn, walking the forest paths where she'd once wandered with Argus, now hand in hand with Alistair. The village had changed. Children no longer taunted her, the elders bowed their heads in respect, and Mara baked her a rose-shaped loaf as a peace offering. But Elara's heart was a battlefield, caught between love and the life she'd always known. One afternoon, she sat by the river, Alistair beside her, the water reflecting the sky's deepening blue. "I've always dreamed of something bigger," she admitted, her voice soft. "But now that it's here, I'm scared. Erinder is a world I don't know. What if I don't belong there?" Alistair took her hand, his touch grounding her. "You belong wherever you choose to be," he said. "You're the strongest person I know, Elara. You loved a dog when the world called you mad. You can face a kingdom." She laughed, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," he said, his eyes earnest. "But I'll be with you. If you choose Erinder, we'll face it together. If you choose Silver Creek, I'll build a life here with you. All I ask is that you choose what makes you happy." That night, Elara lay awake, her mind racing. She thought of her cottage, her roses, the quiet rhythm of village life. Then she thought of Alistair, his unwavering love, and the chance to be part of something greater, a kingdom where she could make a difference. The choice was hers, but it wasn't just about her anymore, it was about them. The next morning, she found Silas in the square, polishing his sword, his face thoughtful. "You've been quiet," she said, sitting beside him. "What do you think I should do?" Silas's eyes met hers, steady and kind. "I've served Alistair for years, seen him suffer in silence. You gave him back his life, Elara. Wherever you go, you'll make a home. But ask yourself, what do you want your story to be?" His words lingered as she returned to her cottage, her heart clearer. She wanted love, yes, but also purpose, a chance to leave a mark beyond Silver Creek's borders. Elara made her choice under the same oak where she'd first poured her heart out to Argus. She stood with Alistair, the forest whispering around them, and took his hands. "I choose us," she said, her voice steady. "I'll go to Erinder, but I want to keep Silver Creek, too. I want to build something here, a school, a library, a place where people can dream beyond these hills." Alistair's eyes lit up, his smile radiant. "Then we'll do it together. Half our time in Erinder, half here. A life that's ours, not the kingdom's or the village's." They returned to Silver Creek hand in hand, their decision a beacon of hope. With the king's blessing, they began their work. Alistair's knowledge and Elara's passion transformed the village. A school rose where children learned to read and dream. A library opened where stories of heroes and magic filled the shelves. The villagers, once skeptical, now saw Elara as their own princess, a woman who had defied the impossible. In Erinder, Elara faced the court with the same courage she'd shown in Silver Creek. She learned their ways, her wit and warmth winning over even the sternest nobles. Alistair stood by her, his love a constant, their bond a story whispered in the halls of the palace. One evening, as they sat in their new home, a modest manor on the edge of Silver Creek, Mara visited, her arms full of fresh bread. "You've changed everything," she said, her eyes shining. "This village, it's alive because of you." Elara smiled, her hand in Alistair's. "It's alive because of love," she said. "And a little bit of magic." Years passed, and Elara and Alistair's story became a legend, carried by a traveling bard whose songs wove their tale into the hearts of all who heard it. From Silver Creek to Erinder, and beyond, people spoke of the woman who loved a dog, who saw a soul where others saw a beast, and whose love broke a curse that seemed unbreakable. The bard's voice, rich and haunting, sang of a village girl who became a princess, not through gold or titles, but through a heart fierce and true. In markets and taverns, children listened wide-eyed, their imaginations alight with hope. Could I love like that? They wondered. Could I be that brave? The story planted a seed in every heart, a belief that love could transcend boundaries, that it could defy appearances, curses, and even the scorn of a world too small to understand. Elara and Alistair grew old together, their lives a tapestry of love and purpose. They taught their children, born of their union, with eyes as bright as Argus's, to see the world with open hearts. Silver Creek flourished, its school and library a beacon for dreamers, while Erinder thrived under Alistair's just rule and Elara's compassionate influence. One starry night, as they sat by the river where they'd first met, Elara leaned against Alistair, her hair now streaked with silver. "Do you ever miss being Argus?" she asked, her voice teasing but soft. He laughed, pulling her close. "Sometimes. But then I remember I get to hold you like this, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Their story lived on, a viral tale that spread far beyond their lifetimes, a reminder that true love is not about perfection, but about seeing the heart beneath the surface. And in every listener, every dreamer, a spark of hope flickered, a belief that love, in its purest form, could change the world. The end.